Hi everyone, I'm just going to leave it a couple of moments to let everybody join. Still going up. Right, I think we'll get started. So hi everybody, I hope you're all safe and well wherever you may be. Welcome to the Conservation Together at Home webinar series. My name is Eleanor Schofield and I'm the chair of the Heritage Science Group. We have another Heritage Science talk today. Before I get on into introducing our speaker, just a few bits. If you're talking about this on social media, please use the hashtag Conservation Together at Home. This is being recorded, so it will be available afterwards to go and watch from both the Book and Paper webinar series website, and there should also be a link on the Heritage Science website as well. Please bear with us in terms of connections. We're all using our own computers and Wi-Fi, so yeah, just bear with us. There is a question and answer box at the bottom. If you have any questions during the talk, please pop them in there and then I will ask them at the end. And I will try and remember to do it at the end, but because I sometimes forget, I'm going to say now, the next talk in this series is tomorrow at 4 p.m. It's Lorraine Finch talking about caring for your collection on a shoestring. And the next science one will be next Wednesday at the slightly later time of 5 o'clock. And it will be Hayley Simon talking about marine archaeological iron. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Josep Grau-Bove is a lecturer in the Institute for Sustainable Heritage at UCL. His research focuses on, oh, it's suddenly gone blank. There we are. On the analysis of heritage environments using monitoring and colourful computational simulations. And today he's going to be talking to us about using online and open apps for preventive conservation. So I will mute myself, turn my video off and hand over to you, Josep.
Excellent. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much, Ali, for the introduction. Also, thank you to the Heritage Science Group for organizing these seminars and inviting me, and for the Book and Paper Group for all the series, the part of the series they've organized. It's been, or they've hosted, it's been great so far. I feel privileged to be in such illustrious company. And I hope my presentation today is going to be useful or interesting to some of you. And I very much look forward to your comments and the discussion afterwards. I'm going to present about one of my favorite topics that keeps me very busy nowadays, the development and the use of online and open apps for preventive conservation. But before I get into the topic, I'd like to first introduce myself very briefly, and I've prepared a single slide that summarizes my CV in 4 images so that you know where I'm coming from. I'm a lecturer in the Institute for Sustainable Heritage, University College London, and I spend my time mostly doing 4 things. As Ali have said, one of the main things I do is very colorful computational simulations. So I do CFD, computational fluid dynamics. I simulate the behavior of environments in different scales, in boxes, in display cases, in rooms, and so on. In my research, I'm also very, very interested in citizen science, so finding ways of involving the public in preventive conservation. For example, this image is of the Monument Monitor project, where we find ways in which visitors to historic sites can contribute images that then we can use to monitor damage. I've also done a lot of public engagement with the Mobile Heritage Lab, going around the country, speaking with all sorts of publics, and I direct a course called MSc in Data Science for Cultural Heritage. So as you can see, the topic we are speaking about today, developing and using online apps for preventive conservation, sits right at the middle of all these things. And that's why it's a topic that it's very close to my heart. I would like to begin by telling you something about the course, the MSc in Data Science for Cultural Heritage. It may be the only data science course in the world where students learn how to use a swirling hygrometer. I like when we introduce how to analyze humidity and temperature data, I like demonstrating this equipment, and I think learning how to use it has many benefits. The first benefit is that it focuses your mind on the importance of a single data point. When we are analyzing a mass of data points in data science approaches, it's very easy that we stop valuing each and every one of them. So it's good to know how much work can go behind one. It also helps the students focus on the type of work that goes in, or used to go mostly in the past, and sometimes still now, the work that goes on in institutions where environments are measured and so on. And it hammers down and it brings home the main learning objective that for me is that in preventive conservation, it doesn't matter how high tech our solutions are. Many of the problems are have to do with how we communicate science to others. So I would like to phrase this way, that there are no purely technical problems in preventive conservation, but research problems are always about people and technology. And that's why in this presentation, I'm not only speaking about the amazing technological advances that let us simulate and predict more than ever using our computers. I also want to focus on how do we do it so that these advancements are used in practice in institutions and people find them interesting and useful and understandable and so on. So it's about technology, but it's also about communication. So let's begin by defining what I mean by an online app or an open online app. I am sure many of you have used this sort of apps before, even if you haven't used one specifically for conservation. Certainly you have Googled sometimes, for example, a popular type of calculator is a calorie calculator. So you can calculate how many calories you have burned with some type of exercise. So that's one of the most popular types of online calculator. This plot here shows the evolution of the popularity of online calculators over the last 15 years. And you can see a couple of interesting things in it. You can see that it's a cyclic popularity, so they are really popular after Christmas. You can see that this cycle repeats every year and it gradually increases. And another interesting thing is that this year during the lockdown, there's a surge in popularity of calorie calculators. I don't think there's a surge in popularity of preventive conservation calculators though. But maybe, I don't know, maybe after this presentation, we'll see one. So this, I'm putting up these images because these simple calculators embody the main features of a calculator. So they are online, you can access them through Google, and when you open them, you have a box with certain areas for inputs and certain areas where you can put the, where you're given the outputs of the calculations. So you can do complex calculations that you wouldn't be able to do by yourself. So how do this type of calculators look in the case of heritage? Well, in order to classify them, I came up with this structure that classifies different types of calculators according to two axes. So in the bottom axis, what we see is the complexity of the calculation, so something that you could do with your Casio, something that you could do with Excel, or something that you would need a supercomputer to. On the other axis, we look at how data hungry your calculator is. So for example, whether it needs no data, just a rough guesstimate in order to do the calculation, whether it needs routine monitoring of environmental conditions, or whether it needs either very large or very complex data. So let's see how the existing and future technologies fit in this plot. At the beginning, we have simple tools for data conversion. So things where you put temperature and humidity and it gives you absolute humidity, where you put a spectra and it gives you lax, or you put, for example, a faded blue wool and it gives you the dose of light. These kind of things are simple calculators that don't require much computational capacity. Another common type of calculator is for estimation of parameters. These are those calculations that are a little bit more complex, but that wouldn't require any data input. So for example, you would have estimation of air exchange rate given the properties of a box or an enclosure. The estimation of a deposition rate of dust given the size of your room and the amount of air motion. This type of things. Another typology is what we know as damage functions. The damage functions are a little bit more data hungry because by definition, their input is environmental information and their output is some sort of material degradation or material damage. So for example, from temperature and humidity, you get chemical damage. Then we would have what I call forecasting models. So these models are computationally also more sophisticated and they are used to predict future scenarios. So for example, you could use a computational fluid dynamics model to predict how the air motion is going to change if you change the ventilation system, or you get a new pump, or you improve the quality of the enclosure. And then more towards the future and being developed at a more experimental stage, we have what we can call digital twins. So that's a 3D digital representation of an object where you can put data, where you can also see estimations of damage, and you can have this digital 3D representation online and share it with people. So that doesn't work quite well yet, but it's in process. So I'm going to give you a couple of words about the structure of this talk. I'll start by saying that, well, research is allowing us to do this more often and better and bigger. But a spoiler alert, at the end, I'm going to say just the opposite, that that's very impressive, but that first we should get the basics right. So why now? Why is the time ripe for this kind of work? Well, it's for the alignment of several reasons. The first thing is that there's been an alignment of the objectives of several key projects. IRIS, the European Infrastructure for Heritage Science, IPERION-HS that develops technologies for this infrastructure, the Apache project that I'm involved in on the development of new enclosures, and other projects. I'm only naming those because these are the ones I'm involved with, but there are others. There are other projects that have, as part of their objective, the intention of putting their results in the shape of online tools that help decision-making in the future. So there's an alignment of interests. Secondly, there's an increased overlap between conservation and programming skills. And that's because several people in our course, Data Science for Cultural Heritage and others, are developing this overlap gradually. But also we could say in fairness that if there's someone who doesn't know programming, this someone would like to learn some. So there's this energy in the field of people wanting to code and wanting to do things with their coding skills. So it's natural that we end up coding things for conservation as well. And finally, I would say that there's another important reason, which is that with the advance of cloud computing, you are no longer limited by the capabilities of your old laptop. In your old laptop, provided you have access to the internet, now you can have a higher computational capacity doing the calculations elsewhere. So all these things are coming together, you see. Okay, time to show some examples. There are so many good examples online that I cannot do justice to all of them. So I'm going to show some that myself and our students have developed in ISH, and I'm going also to show some brilliant examples from other institutions, just as examples, not trying to claim by any means that they cover everything. So one very good example that I would like to suggest, and you may know about, it's HERI-E. So HERI-E has been developed by colleagues in Krakow, Lukasz Bratas and others, and it's a very clever model where you upload temperature and humidity, and it gives you the probability of mechanical damage. It's the first of its kind, and it embodies many of the characteristics that make online tools good. So it's free to access, it has very good science behind, and it has very good visualizations. Another one that I'm sure you're familiar with is the calculator of the Canadian Institute of Conservation to estimate color fading given certain exposure to light. It's very good because it has an excellent visual output, and it's fully on the public domain, so anyone can access what this software is doing behind the scenes. I'm going to show now a couple of our own examples, and I'm going to do live demonstrations, which is always a risk, but why not? Let's try. I am going to assume that everyone now sees my screen. I'm going to show you 3 different calculators. The first one, it's a simple psychometric chart. Now, why programming a psychometric chart? Well, I believe that free and open online tools for preventive conservation don't need to be super sophisticated and cutting edge to be useful. Often it's enough if they do well a single task. For example, they help us visualize some data in a better way. And a good one to start is temperature and humidity data, because we will have a lot of it. So you can upload any file from your computer. You can see how the data appears here. I'm going to highlight my pointer so you can see it better. Yeah, you can see how data appears here. It appears all together. If it's separated by tabs, you can separate it automatically. And then voila, it plots it. If everything goes well, it plots it in a psychometric chart. So you can see all your data points in a plot of temperature and humidity and so on. This calculator also gives you the ability to select custom boundaries for what you consider to be acceptable or unacceptable conditions in a certain institution. So for example, here it would say, if we select this range, 100% of the data points are outside bounds. So maybe instead of a custom range, we may want to choose one of the range of some standard, some institution. Let's say this is an archive, and we select the public document 5454, which prescribes conditions for archives. For archives, it's not very good. 97.7 of the points outside bounds. So maybe we can try with the National Trust. You can see the conditions are wider. 76.5 of the points are outside bounds. Well, it's not a great environment, but maybe we are better off being a historic country house than an archive in this case. So that's an example. Oh, it has another feature. Later on, it does what I call a density plot. So it gives you how many of the data points of pairs of temperature and humidity are in each combination. And you can see that there are several clusters. This cluster here, it's warm and dry. This cluster here is wet and cold. So you can see that this wide diversity of points over a year, in reality, it clusters under several conditions. And that's free. Anyone can use it to upload their data. That requires some monitoring data. What if we have no monitoring data at all? Can we still make use of this sort of calculators? Well, you don't need to be able to measure pollutants, for example, in order to produce good estimations of pollutants inside. You can do this with a tool that was developed in the ISH some years ago, and that lately I've been reviving and updating a little bit. It's called the impact tool. And this tool allows you to calculate the concentration of pollutants inside as a function of the type of environment that you have. It's very easy to use, but you do need to know the concentration of pollutants outside. So the best way to do it is to go to a governmental page. For example, in the UK, there's lots of public data of monitoring stations around the UK, and we can select the location of our museum. Let's say we have a museum in Oxford. We look at the data right now, and we have the concentration of nitrogen dioxide. It's almost exactly 4 micrograms per cubic meter. You go back to the impact tool, and here you can paste it. And after that, you define your building. So the wall, it's made of plaster, 100 square meters, sounds reasonable. The floor shouldn't be made of plaster, let's say wool carpet. The ceiling, plaster sounds kind of okay. We add some square meters of windows, and let's say we have paintings inside. So we have 20 square meters of paintings. It's a large room of a museum, let's say. Paintings, here they are. So what it gives you, it's firstly, it gives you the concentration inside. It tells you if that's your room, you're going to have an indoor concentration of 1.25, whatever units that was, micrograms per cubic meter. And then it tells you where pollutants deposit. So 56% of the pollutants would deposit on the floor, and a tiny percentage, about 10%, would deposit on paintings. This tool, since it has existed for quite a long time, it's been validated extensively with experimental data. So we can say that it coincides with real measurements. So it can be used predictively. In a more experimental way, we have developed a similar one for deposition, for particulate matter deposition. This one is, I say this one is more experimental because it's at the different stage of validation. We have compared its predictions with a few sites, but not with hundreds. So if anyone uses it and has data to indicate whether it works or not, I'd be really interested to hear about it. So time to visible deposition, you introduce the type of particle that you have, like say PM 2.5, the maximum deposition that you consider allowable. So for example, 5% deposition, it's the minimum that we can detect on the surface with a human eye. You select your concentration of particles outside, which is generally very low. Let's say in our case in Oxford, it would be about 2. And then you get an estimation of how long it takes until the dirt is visible. In this case, it tells you visible deposition will be achieved in 4 weeks, which is quite slow. It's certainly slower than in my flat. And it shows this plot of how the gradual increase in area coverage happens. It also tells you the results by particle size. I'm not going to go into the details of how this works. This would be for another presentation, but if anyone is interested, anyone has validation data, or anyone wants to use it, I would be very keen to discuss further. So that's everything for these examples. And they have a series of common features that I would like to highlight. And it's what I call, I use 2 words in Spanish, gratis and libre, and transparent and honest. And I think that ideally this kind of tools would be this way. So they are free, as in gratis in Spanish, because there's no paywall, or else they are very widely accessible. They are free, as in libre, as in freedom, because anyone can fork them, create an alternative, or contribute to the code or the science behind them. They are open, as in transparent, because anyone can see the engine behind, and they are based on published papers, mostly in open access, so anyone can see what are the equations that these things are solving. And they are honest for 2 reasons. First, they acknowledge uncertainty. Now, while I was speaking, I've tried to be open about their limitations, and when we present them to the public, I would like to do the same. And secondly, they don't pretend to think on your behalf. I really, really dislike traffic light systems that tell you that your conditions are red or green. They are tempting for the communicator because it gives you an easy solution to a problem. But I much prefer the alternative of engaging into a real discussion with the data and providing the evidence that shows why these conditions could be interpreted one way or another. So these apps should help management, but they shouldn't pretend that they can manage for you, because they cannot. They are very simple tools that they only do one thing right in a narrow band of application. So to sum up, we've been talking roughly about tools in these areas, data conversion, estimation of parameters, and damage functions at different stages of development. What next? So what is the future for this kind of tools? Well, I am going to try to illustrate the future using two examples currently under development in the Institute for Sustainable Heritage. There are many exciting examples everywhere, but these are the two I can speak with some assurance about. So the first example, they both fall in the category of a forecasting model, let's say. The first example, it's a tool to model the access and degradation of paper collections. This tool, it's being created mostly by Cristina Duran. It's her PhD project. Now, Cristina Duran, it's incredibly smart and very good with maths. So I'm not sure I can do full justice to the app, and she would explain it a lot better. But I'm just going to try to give a snapshot of what it does. It solves simultaneously 4 models. One model that predicts the chemical degradation of paper as a function of storage conditions. Model number 2 predicts the degradation as a function of access. Naturally, as you know very well, if something is very chemically degraded, it's going to break more when you handle it. So that's model number 2 is linked with model number 1, because physical degradation is also a function of the level of chemical degradation. Then model number 3, it predicts the change in access to a reading room of an archive, so physical access, as a function of how much digitization you have done. And model number 4, it makes a cost balance. So it measures the costs or estimates the costs of expenditure in energy, staff, mitigation, such as deacidification, or how much you invest in digitization. So 4 different models: chemical, physical, how access changes in the room, and cost balances. Now, let's see how this looks like, and I hope I can manage to make a successful demonstration. I'll do it through a video because it would be too risky to try to run successfully the model in front of all you. So that's the page where you set up the model. You can define your collection, saying how long it is in terms of meters. You can define some other parameters that correspond. You define what is in a meter of your collection. You can define access, how many requests per year, whether there are, which percentage of your collection you would consider to be very popular. Then you define your repository. So you would define the surface area, the air exchange rate, how leaky it is, and then preservation measures, deacidification, scanning, and temperature. What is that you want to do? You can choose only temperature, only deacidification, doing nothing, and only digitizing, hoping to reduce access. You can choose any combination you want. And then you click play. Now in the video, the user is setting up some parameters, adjusting the humidity. You click play and you get into that screen, which is incredibly busy, and there are lots of things going on, and I cannot explain in all the detail I would like to. But I'll just explain its main features. You can ignore the simulation model bit because it's difficult to explain it without being too technical, but you can see the other 2 boxes, the panel control, where you choose the conditions of storage, temperature, humidity, deacidification, and digitization, and the results. In the results, you can see how the chemical condition is going to evolve in the next 500 years. So imagine the uncertainties associated with this. It doesn't take into account, for example, a global pandemic. But let's imagine that we can consider conditions constant for 500 years. So it shows how chemical condition evolves, how wear and tear evolves as a result. It also tells you the number of requests, which is decaying because of the success of digitization, and an estimation of where the costs are going to go. In the middle of the simulation, at any point, you can pause, like let's say after 100 years or after 20 or 2 years, you can pause and change the temperature and see how that would affect the longevity of your collection. So that's one model that by the end of this research project, and that's, let's say, a couple of years, we expect to at least have a demo version online that you can play with it. If anyone is interested, I would be very happy to share more details, and certainly Cristina would be very happy to hear from you as well. Another type of model that we are doing predicts storage enclosures, so the behavior of storage enclosures. That model is being developed by some of us. The lead developer is Dr. Himantha Correa in the Institute for Sustainable Heritage. It's a model in which the user can define any enclosure, let's say any closed space, that it could be a box, an envelope, or a display case. You choose the materials, you choose the size, you select which objects are inside and how hygroscopic they are. You can select the thickness of the materials, you can put holes in it, whatever you want, and then it predicts the conditions inside. And the purpose of this model is that it's going to help people make decisions about what kind of display cases they need, because they will be able to manufacture the perfect display case for their environment. But it can also push the development of boxes and display cases forward by allowing manufacturers to be very specific about the kind of box that they develop for which purposes. I'm not going to show how this works because it's not online yet by any means. We've been working on this for a little bit less than a year now, but that's the type of results that it gives. So you can select different types of walls, multi-layer, single layer, and so on. And then it produces plots of environmental conditions inside as a function of environmental conditions outside. A straightforward results, but there's a lot of science behind making this work well. Excellent. Now I've spoken a little bit about what exists, a little bit about what we are working on. Let's speak about our wildest ambitions for the future. Obviously, with what I've told you, it's clear that we are heading towards more capabilities of these open, online, access-free models. Clearly, we'll be able to do anything with them in a couple of years. There's people working on them in many institutions around the world. And that it's great, but it also worries me a little bit because I can see the risk that everyone starts working on the same things. So my wish for the future, rather than a prediction, my wish is that yes, there will be more capabilities, but also less duplication. And there's only one way of doing this, which is that we all chip in and that everyone that is interested in the topic makes their voice heard. So there should be more capabilities, less duplication, and therefore more collaboration. And I don't mean simply collaboration between people who know the equations or develop them and know how to code. I also mean collaboration between the developers and the potential users and the experts that know the real behavior of heritage environments. There should be a dialogue so that these developments are well informed. And it's not simply, let's say, the hobbies or the pet subjects of the people that know how to code. So my last wish for the future is that you will join, and that if any of you is interested about this or sees its benefits or its limitations, you email me and the other people working in this area, and we have a conversation about how to do it better in the future. And in order to put my work where my mouth is, I am going to end the talk by announcing two events. One is a training course by Bhavesh Shah from the Victoria and Albert Museum, hosted by the ICON Heritage Science Group. This talk, it's going to happen on the 26th of June, and it's going to be advertised imminently. It's called Beyond Excel, using R to analyze data. R is the software that I have used to develop the tools I was demonstrating to you. So after this course, you should be able to do exactly the same thing. And then I have another offer. I am organizing what I call a community development forum. This is for anyone who wants to have their say on the apps of the future. Both people who are interested in coding or people who are not interested in coding but are very opinionated and would like to contribute to our roadmap. The main question that we're going to answer is how we develop this with no time and no money. How do we put in the work in the most optimal way? And that's going to be, I'm going to circulate a link so you can sign up, and that's going to happen on the afternoon of the 2nd of July. So I hope I can hear from you. In this presentation, which I would like to send to all attendees if possible afterwards, I have included a list of links to all the apps that I've shown and many others that I haven't had time to show. So if you want a collection of these apps, I'm very happy to share this with you. That's everything. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Josep. That was so interesting. I'm just thinking about the number of times that I've been asked things like how long will the Mary Rose survive, or if you turned off all the environmental controls, how long will it survive, which I usually fudge some answer to or go. And I think it's so important, the amount of data that I think people in museums and heritage organisations are sat on without the correct tools to do something with. I certainly am in that position. Right, let's get on to some questions. So yeah, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box and I will ask them to Josep. So the first one, I understand the theory behind these functions. I think this was asked a little earlier on in the talk. Our objects are often very complex in age. Do you know if there's been any testing of the results against actual heritage object behaviour, especially for physical damage?
I missed the first part, Ellie, could you repeat?
I understand the theory behind these functions. Our objects are often very complex and aged. Do you know if there's been any testing of the results against actual heritage object behaviour, especially for physical damage?
Ongoing, yes. I mean, for physical damage specifically, yes, in the development of the functions for the wear and tear of papers. I mean, I would be very happy to share these papers with you. It has been tested both with mock-ups and with real objects, and it has been validated also with observations in actual archives. So there's been quite a bit of work in this area. In the case of cracking or risk of mechanical damage because of humidity fluctuations, that's a more recent area of research, I would say. There's a lot of work being done, but maybe not so much data published yet.
Okay. So on transparency, what happens to any data that is put into these web tools?
Different projects would treat it differently. At least I can speak about the three apps that I've shown. The data goes nowhere, so it's temporarily stored in the short-term memory of the browser, and then it disappears as soon as you close it or you upload another file. That doesn't mean that that's the case for all apps. And I know of some projects, and certainly in some of the other projects where we are actively developing apps, we are discussing the possibility of creating a database at the same time, suitably anonymized, to allow further analysis afterwards. Of course, if we end up doing this, we're going to put that openly in the documentation.
Okay. In looking at plastics, are you considering specifying the plastic types? The permeability of different plastics is very different.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I think I didn't mention plastics in these apps because they are far too complicated for me. But there's a whole group in UCL studying the degradation of plastics and creating a model, which is, I mean, it's a very pioneering model, and they are at early stages of putting it together. Certainly they would have plans to share it in some form afterwards. They've made some publications already, but it's by far not at the stage where we can make by confidence an open app like this. But certainly, the property that you mentioned, was it porosity or permeability?
It was
well, never mind.
Permeability.
Yeah, permeability, so probably regarding moisture transfer. I mean, that's a key property in the degradation processes. We haven't, I cannot comment on how it would influence degradation. That's a whole different discussion. But we've looked at it in the framework of how it mediates environment inside boxes. So you have a box made of plastic rather than a box made of cardboard. So we've measured permeabilities of a wide range of materials in this context in order to be able to put that in one of the models that I have announced.
Okay. Excellent talk, thank you so much. Any tips on starting learning how to code as a paper conservator with lots of interest in programming but no formal experience? Now, I'm going to add a quick answer onto this because I also recently, you know this, we've had a conversation about this. So I also recently wanted to start to learn how to code. And a couple of things I did a beginner's course, but the other thing I did is there's some excellent books out there, which I think are primarily aimed at children for making little computer games and stuff. So, and I actually found that quite a nice way to kind of get to grips with some of it, just as something to feel really heavy and really work-like. It was just quite fun. And you do pick up little bits and pieces, but so that was my answer. What would you say, Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, I'd subscribe totally with this, and there are so many online resources and entry-level code. I mean, just Googling it very quickly provides so many resources for learning that it actually can be quite a little bit daunting to choose one. But what I would say is that you just go for it and make an arbitrary choice at the beginning, because the skills are highly transferable and you almost cannot get it wrong. The best possibly advice, and someone is sharing Code Academy, so perfect. That's I was trying to remember the name. But the best possible advice is, rather than try to learn programming in abstract, try to develop a task. So let's say you want to make something easy that converts from relative humidity to absolute humidity with two little boxes and a button. You just set yourself this objective, and then everything starts falling into place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There was quite a lot of questions there about the links and stuff like that. I would suggest that so this talk has been recorded and it'll be available, and obviously all the links are on that last slide there. That's right, isn't it? So that would I would probably say that's the best place to go and do it. Otherwise, I could see if maybe we could tweet a screenshot out or something like that on either through your account or through the Heritage Science Group one.
That's a good idea. I can put all the links on Twitter. I can like make a thread and we retweet it with the hashtag, and then
if you put this hashtag in and also put in maybe the science group and the general icon group, then hopefully we'll find it there. But then if that fails, then if you look on the recording and skip to the end, then you'll be able to get the links there. Also, people wanting to know how to sign up for the courses and stuff like that. Lots of interest in that. Right. One last question here. So air exchange generally is driven by very small cracks, gaps, and identical boxes of same type have very different values. Will this be taken into account in the modeling?
Oh, yes. Well, in that, with this, we are getting, I mean, I know, and it's been a pain. We have had to dampen our expectations a little bit about how predictive we can be with this, because we have done several experiments with boxes where one would say, well, there are no cracks, and you still see certain air exchange rate higher than what you expected, and so on. Regarding what is that you cannot measure, so that, you know, like the small differences between in the fold of the boxes, if it's a cardboard box, and with small construction differences that result in leakage and these kind of things. This is where the uncertainty of the model comes in. And one thing that I feel uneasy about some of the results I've shown you is that they have very solid lines that tell you, this is the plot, it's going through this line. I would love to be able to add an uncertainty to each of these lines in order to acknowledge the fact that when we've done experiments in preparation, we've never obtained the same result twice within a certain margin. So that's why I say these apps need to be honest, because we cannot exaggerate our capacity to predict.
Yeah. Okay, right. Well, that's all our questions. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Lots of comments here saying thank you, how refreshing it was and interesting. So, and hopefully you'll get people signed up for your course. And like I say, we'll try and tweet out the links, and also if that fails, go to the recording. So next in this series, tomorrow will be Lorraine Finch talking about caring for your collection on a shoestring. And then we'll have another Heritage Science one next Wednesday at 5 o'clock with Hayley Simon, talking about marine archaeological iron. So Stay well, stay safe, everyone, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.